Why hello, welcome to today's Psychic Tarot reading looking at Finland, whether they will be entering NATO anytime soon. But before we get to that, I wanted to address something that somebody asked, and earlier on in my videos, something that I used to do. When I would do a tarot reading, I would show myself my hands over the cards as I did the reading, and some people have asked why I no longer do that. The reason is not that I don't want to, but because it takes a long time actually, and a lot of times I'll examine the cards for well over a few minutes, but sometimes the energy is very clear and it comes right away, but sometimes not. So to show that process in the video, I think it would just be very long and tiresome to watch it. So I just kind of decided to stop showing it. Also, I think it makes me a little just not relaxed in a way I need to be to do a good reading. So that's the reason why. It's not that I can't, but I decided at some point it wasn't really beneficial enough. And anyway, let's get to the reading of Finland. So there's been a lot of talk recently about Finland joining NATO, which would have, well, Russia doesn't like it because NATO represents a potentially, a military organization that includes the United States. So that arsenal could be right at Russia's border. Finland's right along their western border. So Russia doesn't like that. And but Finland has used this Ukraine situation to help justify it, and probably reasonably so, that they want to join NATO. So that seems to be going ahead at a rapid pace. What are the prospects of that happening? Now, to join NATO, even if within Finland they agree that they want to do that, it still is going to take a while because I believe all the NATO members, and I think there's about 30, need to ratify that agreement before Finland can join. So that process is probably going to take at least several months, and it could take up to a year or so for all we know. So that's the situation as it is right now. So I guess the first thing I wanted to know is, what is the prospects of Finland joining? And I kind of limited the time frame to the next year because, like I said, it can take a while sometimes for all the signatures and stamps to be put into place. The card that came up was the Five of Swords, and the Five of Swords is a card that looks like I always ask people just to look at the card and what do you see, and a lot of times there are different characters in the card, and so it's not always clear who each character represents. But for me, it usually is pretty clear, and I know which character. And this guy with all these swords, to me, is not Russia. This is actually Finland, and I see this as them being, in a situation, a position that they've wanted. So I think supposedly before the Ukraine invasion, there was like only 20 to 30% approval within Finland to want to join NATO. But since then, the approval rating in the polls has supposedly risen to about 70%, which means like 70% of people, most of the people in Finland, apparently now want to join NATO. So with this card, I see this as Finland basically being happy to complete that process, and I think it is very likely that it is going to be happening in the next year. Probably, I think it's going to happen even sooner than that. I would say within the next 6 months. Next, I was curious about Russia, their general attitude and feelings towards Finland at this moment. And, I want to know, like, how prepared are they to declare war, or what is their intention if Finland does go ahead? Or even, there's been talk even before, even if they're considering going ahead, that's like enough for Russia to justify doing some things. I've heard like cutting off electricity, and Russia has a lot of power resources. So what is Russia's attitude in general towards Finland at this moment as it considers entering NATO? The card that came up was the Knight of Cups, and the Knights can be warlike, but the Knight of Cups, I would say, is possibly the least warlike of the Knights, because he's just a very emotional fellow, and I think he's more likely, he has all this energy within him. That's Russia they are very testy about Finland, seriously. They're not, but it doesn't necessarily mean war, like I said. So my take on this is that yes, they are seriously angered that Finland's considering NATO membership, that NATO is going to be right at their border. But I don't see it as necessarily a warlike attitude. I see them willing to take steps, and I see a hardening of attitudes between the two countries, but I don't see it as immediately physical war. So that's Russia's general attitude, but I wanted to know more specifically, what is the prospects of an actual physical attack on Finland? And for that, the card that came up was the Five of Cups, another Cups card. So again, I think Russia is very tied up with this this concept within its head that they don't want an expansion of NATO, and they're very serious about it. But both of these Cups cards strike me as a situation in which Russia is again retreating, and I see this basically turning into more of a Cold War situation. The Iron Curtain feels like it's falling again, and initially with the war in Ukraine, it seemed like Russia might be, killing itself with by having all these sanctions and other things imposed by other countries. But Russia has actually weathered pretty well, and it seems to be building up its corridor, especially with China, to allow itself to continue without support from the West. So I think basically, Cold War situation, emotional retreat within itself, very strong within Russia, but I don't see it lashing out immediately unless provoked into a physical war. Finally, I took a look at the general energy that we can expect in 2022 for the remainder of this year in that area right near Finland, Russia, along the border. What does that general energy between those two countries look like? To my surprise, the card that came up was the Nine of Cups, which is generally a pretty satisfied and happy card. So I was thinking about, why would that be? And I think it's just, in general, both countries are, Russia, like I said, is kind of defining itself as this Cold War power again, and they're basically being content with that. Finland is, joining NATO, and that bolsters its sense of security. So both countries, this card is very, I guess self-righteous might be the word. It's very content with its attitude, and it's not, or if you want to use the modern term, based, which I don't really like that term, but you could say that both countries feel very based. And when, even saying it sounds ridiculous, but when two countries are that self-righteous, it just makes for not much dynamic energy between them. There's certainly not going to be positive feelings flowing between them, but it's very stuck and self-righteous and stubborn. That might be a better word. So both countries are in a very stubborn and locked down position, but they're okay with that, and they're willing to deal with that. And that's the situation we have. Should I do a reading on Sweden next? Other countries? Let me know what you'd like me to do a reading on in the comments below, and I'll do my best to do so. I'm trying to do more videos, but I always get slowed down by life, but I will do my best to answer your questions, or you can always contact me directly here. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.